Welcome back to Coffee Octane. I am Taylor. Today we are currently back on the Barn to Brat project. I am currently letting some degreaser soak in so we can try and get some of that gunk and grime off of the engine. Then we're going to throw the exhaust on and try to fire this thing up, see how it sounds. So this thing has tons of grease and grime. I've already hit it with the pressure washer once, but we're letting some degreaser soak in down here and underneath to try and get the rest of it off. I've gotten quite a bit off, like I said, a lot off of the rear wheel and stuff. It's all looking pretty good. So it's been about 10 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the pressure washer again, see if we can get it a little bit better. So after I washed it off, I took the leaf blower and just blew it all out and made sure there's kind of no standing water near any of the electrical connections, and kind of gives us a good idea of what we're actually looking at. This is 100 times better than it was. It was so freaking gross. It's still not perfect, but I'm gonna call it good because I still need to do some kind of finish grinding and stuff, so I'm gonna have to wash it again. So we'll just do a final degrease and pressure wash and dry later on when we get a little bit farther down the road. So what I want to do now is I'm going to throw the exhaust on. So I'll put new gaskets in there, throw the exhaust on, and then let's see how it fits. So it looks like a lot of the old, I think all but one exhaust gaskets are still in here. Kind of hard to see with the crud in there, but basically you can just get a little flathead screwdriver and you can see it right there. So these are just little copper rings that are designed to crush. Obviously we're not going to use these anymore, so I'm going to pull them all out, spray a little bit of cleaner in here and just kind of get a good mating surface, get rid of some of this carbon. Then we'll throw in our fresh ones. Have our little toolkit that came with the exhaust. These are the exhaust gaskets, just little copper rings like we said. This is what they look like when they're new. This is what they look like after who knows how many miles. So all these do is just sit right in, just like that. There's a little gap. I like to put that towards the back. Pretty sure that's right. Or it doesn't matter. Or it could be wrong. But that's the way I've always done it, and I've always had good luck. So we'll slide all these in. They should sit flush against a little flange in the back there. And then we're ready for each individual exhaust pipe. Here's the exhaust that's going on the bike if you didn't see it in my last video. It's from a company called, I'm going to pronounce it Delkevic. D-E-L-K-E-V-I-C. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it, hopefully. It's a full stainless, and then this is a stainless 12-inch universal shorty muffler from Dime City Cycles. This is the exact same muffler I used on my last CB550, the one with the brushed tank, not the maroon one, but the one after that. And I loved the way that sounded. It's in the intro to this video as well. You can kind of hear the differences between the couple of CB550s that I've built. So I'm happy to hear how this sounds. So basically we're just going to go one pipe at a time, mount it up to the actual head itself. It has flanges built in, so we don't need to use the stock flanges. Then we will worry about the collector and the muffler. Here's how she looks with just the header on. Pretty darn good. Only thing I'm not crazy about This number 2 flange looks a little bit off, and I've messed with it. It still seems off. I don't know if one of my studs is a little bit bent or what, but I'll have to kind of keep an eye on that, see if it leaks, see if we need to tweak it a little bit further. So I'm starting to put the springs in now. Basically there's little hoops on the individual header tubes, and then a kind of a hoop on the collector itself. And you put these super strong springs on there using this little tool. It's a real pain in the ass, but it holds it on there really tight. So I'm going to go ahead and put the other 3 on, and then we'll see how the muffler works. You can already tell I'm going to need to figure out some way to secure the muffler. I'm hoping I can just get like a stainless exhaust clamp, but I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a minute when I get that on. So you can see we got our springs on there now. That holds it super secure, hugs the frame nicely. It's pretty darn stable. Oh yeah, I mean that's super stiff. So this is the part I was talking about. This muffler basically just slips on over that other pipe, but that's all we have. So we've got to figure out a way to connect this to this. I think it would be kind of cool to do similar springs, but what I'm really thinking about doing is just getting like a stainless exhaust clamp, going over here, hiding the bolt in the back, and just clamping it down on there. So I might look for a little bit, see if I can find one of these, and then maybe we could TIG weld on the little hoops and stuff. But worst case scenario, I'm just going to go with the little exhaust clip thing, like I said. Clamp, I should say. So I think we're actually ready to start it. What I want to do is just set up a temporary fuel source. Still working on the dents on that SOB over there. So I don't really want to put gas in it while I'm still working on it. So yeah, I'm just going to set up like a temporary fuel source so we can get some fuel and actually run this thing for a little while, and then we're going to put the key to it and see what happens. Well, that is a puddle of unburnt fuel on the ground. I hooked up my auxiliary fuel tank with some gas kindly donated from the Triumph, and I start to fill it up, and it starts to pee fuel out of a couple of different places. Basically it looks like there's some O-rings and the little fuel crossover tubes that may be bad, as well as the actual fuel line itself looks like it's leaking. So we're going to pull the carbs back off and address that before we can actually start it. Got the carbs on the bench. So right under here, this is a fuel crossover. So the fuel line, or the one that goes to these 2 carbs, goes right here, tees off, and there's an O-ring on each side. Those can get dry rotted, and then you can see fuel kind of seep out. So what you have to do is basically pull, there's like Phillips head screws in the back here that hold all the carbs onto one backing plate. Once you get that off, you can kind of separate the carbs enough to pull that out and put new O-rings in. So there's one right here, and then there's one over here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. While I'm in there, I might as well replace these little vacuum lines that connect the 2 carbs as well, because they're looking a little dirty, a little dry rotted. So we'll do that, and then we'll also replace the 2 fuel lines that come in the back and go to those little T-fittings. Once you take all 8 of these big Phillips out of the backing plate, you can get some movement on the carbs. Be careful not to go too crazy with the movement. We don't want to bend anything, but you're just looking to kind of get them free enough to move them just apart. This is that little fitting I was talking about. So this is where the fuel line comes in. There's an identical one right here. And there's 2 O-rings on each side. They just get kind of brittle and they start to seep gas out. So if you have gas kind of seeping out from each side, you can do this exact thing. I just use my little O-ring assortment kit and find some matching sizes and swap them out. So I'm going to swap out these 4, put it back together, pull the one out of here, and then we can put it back together completely. These 2 carbs, number 1 and number 2, were leaking fuel out of these drains, meaning it's been a couple of months since this bike has run, so I'm sure the floats are just stuck. So I'm going to probably pull the bowls off and spray them down with carb cleaner and just make sure that the floats are nice and free, and then we'll put it all back together, put it back on the bike, and hopefully this time actually be able to start it. Got the carbs all back together, back on the bike. Seem to be holding air. They seem to be holding fuel and not leaking out. So we're gonna try and start it. I don't have any reason to think that it won't start. So I filled up both sides. So in theory, there's fuel in the bowls. I am going to turn the choke on. I'm going to give it a couple of turns with the ignition off just to get some oil pressure. Okay, oil light just went off. Turn the ignition on. Let's see what happens. Pretty good. Definitely still some carb love to do, but damn, that sounds really good. Alright guys, we just jumped to the next day. Sorry if it's a little bit jumbled, but I didn't want to leave the video off with the bike kind of running a little bit weird. I thought about it today, and I think I figured out what the problem was. So I wanted to kind of fill you in on what I was thinking, and then we'll see if it works. So what I was seeing is only number 1 and number 3 were firing, because those 2 tubes started to heat up, and the other 2 weren't. So we were actually missing on 2 of the cylinders, and since I know that number 4 had spark, that's when I determined that the issue was really just the fuel wasn't getting into the bowls for number 2 and number 4, because the bike on its kickstand is naturally kind of tilted over, so the fuel was coming in the fuel line, running into number 3. If you don't know, 3 and 4 share a fuel line, 1 and 2 share a fuel line. So basically it was coming in, going to the left carb, which is number 1, coming in over here, going to the left carb, which is number 3. Those cylinders were running just fine. That was a long-winded explanation of we weren't getting fuel in those 2. So I went ahead and put in a T-fitting into my auxiliary fuel tank here. And I want to fire it up and see how it sounds now, and see if we can hopefully get all 4 cylinders running. I went ahead and threw on the shotgun mic as well. I think it's going to pick up this audio a little bit better. And the choke on. Fire it up again, see if we can't get it to idle down nicely. So we obviously still have carb syncing and a lot of other stuff to do to get it running perfect, but it runs pretty darn good, pretty darn well. Yeah, so obviously our issue was the fuel not getting there, which I'm really glad, because I was a little bit worried when it wasn't running right. So now we know, hey, when all 4 of the carbs actually get fuel, it runs pretty well. One thing I did just fine, what I was doing with the multimeter was actually checking the charging system. It does not look like it's charging. So that'll be an interesting problem that didn't know existed until just now. So we'll have to dive into that and see if it's an issue with our new voltage regulator, or what's probably more likely is an issue with the actual charging unit on the side, which we can dive into. But yeah, so I didn't want to leave that video, or this video, off with the bike running like crap. So you can hear it. Sounds really, really good. Cool. I'll see you guys next week.